I parked my beat-up Toyota Corolla between a sleek Bentley and a glossy Tesla, their doors slamming with the kind of confidence that screams money. Mine shut quietly, like it always did, like me. It had been nearly a decade since I last set foot in the Hill family estate in Napa Valley, the kind of place where vineyards stretch for miles, and every glass of wine feels like a status symbol. I was 34 now, wearing a simple black dress I'd grabbed from my Seattle closet. No designer label, just sharp and understated. I didn't bring a date or a plus one. Just myself, Delilah Hill, the one they never quite saw. The front door was open, and through the arched entryway, I heard the familiar clink of crystal and laughter that cut like a well-aimed dart. The dining room hadn't changed. A massive oak table, 16 chairs, and a chandelier dripping light like liquid gold. My mother, Mary, sat at the head, her silver hair flawless, her smile sharp as ever. She saw me and tilted her head, her eyes glinting with something cold. "Well," she said, loud enough for the staff to hear, "look who decided to grace us with her presence." The room paused. My brother John, the San Francisco lawyer with a tie that cost more than my rent back in the day, smirked. His wife, Claire, gave a little laugh, the kind that hides a blade. Cousin Wyatt, all Los Angeles flash and Wall Street swagger, raised his glass like he was toasting my failure. Then Mary's voice sliced through again, clear and deliberate. "You're an embarrassment to this family, Delilah." No one flinched. John nodded faintly, Claire looked at her plate, and Wyatt just grinned. I didn't respond. I walked to the last empty seat, next to a silver platter no one offered me, and sat down. My wristwatch, a plain leather thing an investor gave me years ago, ticked softly. John raised his glass to standards we uphold, his eyes on me. I didn't lift mine. They didn't notice, or maybe they did. That was the point. I wasn't here for their approval. I was here for something else, something I couldn't name yet, but it felt heavier than their words as I sat at that table, the weight of their stares pressing into me, and my mind drifted back to where it all started. Growing up in Napa, I was the odd one out in the Hill family. Mary ran the winery with an iron grip, obsessed with legacy. John was her golden boy, destined for law school, while I was the kid who'd rather tinker with code than sip Cabernet. When I got into UC Berkeley for computer science, I thought they'd be proud. Instead, Mary blinked and said, "It's practical." My father, long gone by then, didn't even comment. John, fresh off his Stanford degree, suggested I try something more fitting like business school. I was 22 when I left. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming matches, no slammed doors. I just packed a duffel bag and took a bus to Seattle with a one-way ticket and a stubborn dream. I'd graduated with honors, but my family saw it as a consolation prize, not Ivy League enough for the Hill name. That stung, but it also lit a fire. In Seattle, I rented a cramped apartment with spotty Wi-Fi and poured everything into Horizon Systems. I coded late into the night, fueled by cheap coffee and rejection emails, 57 of them before a venture capitalist, a former DARPA engineer named Carla, saw my pitch. She gave me $250,000 and a leather watch, saying, "Track your milestones, not just your hours." I've worn it ever since. Those early days were brutal. I pitched to blank Zoom screens, ate instant noodles, and doubted myself more times than I'd admit. But every no pushed me harder. When I landed Horizon's first contract, a small cybersecurity deal with a local firm, I sent Mary a letter, not for praise, just to share. 3 weeks later, her response came, typed, formal, cold. "Don't tie the Hill name to something unproven." No congratulations, no call. I framed that letter, not out of spite, but as a reminder. Every time a deal fell through, every time a door closed, I read it. It wasn't a wound, it was fuel. Horizon grew, first to $10 million, then $100 million, then billions. I didn't go back to Napa, not for holidays, not for John and Claire's twins, not even when Mary called after Dad's heart scare, talking about family unity. They never invited me, and I never begged. Sitting here now, their laughter ringing in my ears, I clutched that watch. It's ticking steady. I wasn't the kid they dismissed anymore. I was something else, something they couldn't see. Not yet. The dining room smelled of roasted lamb and rosemary, served on plates so delicate they looked like they'd crack under a harsh word. Mary always insisted on lamb for family dinners, flown in from some artisanal farm in Oregon, because standards matter. I picked at it, my fork moving more out of habit than hunger. Across the table, John was mid-story, waving his fork like a conductor's baton, recounting how he'd saved a merger from collapsing at his law firm. His voice carried that courtroom confidence, the kind that made you feel small if you weren't in on the deal. Claire, perched beside him, chimed in with her usual polish, bragging about his youngest partner, title like it was her own. Wyatt, sprawled in his chair, was louder than he needed to be, explaining why his hedge fund's latest bet on green tech was revolutionary. He gestured with his wine glass, splashing a drop on the tablecloth, but no one cared. He was Wyatt, and excess was his brand. Mary sat at the head, her smile tight, orchestrating the conversation like she did everything else. I felt their eyes on me, waiting for me to shrink, to play the role they'd cast me in. Delilah, the failure who dared to show up. Then Mary turned to me, her voice dripping with false warmth. Still dabbling in computers, dear? Not tech, not cybersecurity, not Horizon systems, just computers, like I was a kid messing with a toy laptop. I nodded, keeping my tone even. Still building systems. That should have been the end of it, but Wyatt leaned forward, his grin wide. What, like apps? Websites? You into that crypto nonsense? I could have told them Horizon's platform secured 20% of the Pentagon's cloud data. I didn't. Instead, I said something like that. John jumped in, smirking, reminding everyone how I used to waste nights coding on my old PC as a teenager. Thought it was a phase, Mary added, her laugh sharp enough to cut glass. Claire, slicing her lamb, asked if I was still doing it all solo, as if I were some hobbyist in a garage. I kept it short. I have a team. John's smile twisted. Eventually, everyone needs a real job, Delilah. The table chuckled, soft and practiced, like they'd rehearsed this. Mary raised her glass, her voice all diplomacy. Delilah's always been independent. The word hung there, different, wrong, not one of us. Wyatt toasted to the dreamers, his wink heavy with mockery. I didn't raise my glass. My fingers brushed my watch, its steady tick grounding me. Their words stung, but I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago to let their judgment slide off me. I wasn't here to prove them wrong, not yet. I was here to feel the weight of this moment, to see if it still hurt. It did, but not enough to break me. I took a sip of water, my eyes on the untouched lamb, and waited. As the table's laughter faded, my mind wandered to the years I'd spent building Horizon systems, piece by piece, rejection by rejection. Back in Seattle, in that drafty apartment with a leaking faucet, I'd coded until my eyes burned, chasing a vision no one in this room believed in. My family saw my computer science degree as a quirk, not a future. Mary once called it cute when I tried explaining encryption at a holiday party. John said I'd burn out before 30. But every dismissal pushed me harder. Horizon started small, a cybersecurity tool I built for a local bank, barely enough to cover rent. I pitched to investors who didn't bother hiding their skepticism. Too niche, they'd say, or you're young, come back with experience. 57 rejections later, Carla, the DARPA engineer, saw my demo and believed. Her $250,000 wasn't just money, it was validation. She gave me the watch I still wore, a simple leather band that reminded me to measure success by my own milestones, not my family's. From there, Horizon grew. That first bank contract led to a regional tech firm, then a state agency. When we landed a Department of Defense deal, I thought about calling home, but Mary's letter, those cold words about not tainting the Hill name, stopped me. I framed it instead, hanging it in my office as a reminder of what I was running from. By the time Horizon hit $100 million in revenue, we had 300 employees, offices in Seattle and Singapore, and a NATO bid in the works. Last month, we crossed $6 billion in valuation, securing 20% of the Pentagon's cloud infrastructure. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I had to, because proving them wrong was the only way I could prove myself right. Sitting here, their voices droning on about mergers and markets, I felt the weight of what I'd built. They didn't know about the sleepless nights, the deals that almost collapsed, the times I doubted I'd make it. They didn't know about Rachel, my assistant, who'd been with me since our Berkeley days, or the team that turned my code into an empire. They saw the girl who left, not the woman who'd built something bigger than their winery, their law firm, their hedge fund combined, and my fork rested on my plate, the lamb barely touched. I wasn't hungry. Not for their food, not for their approval. My watch ticked softly, a quiet pulse against their noise. I'd come back to this table not to beg for a seat, but to see if they'd finally notice me. They hadn't. Not yet. But the moment was coming, and I could feel it, steady as the ticking on my wrist. The chandelier's light glinted off the wine glasses, casting sharp reflections across the table. Mary's lamb was gone, replaced by dessert, peach tarts with whipped cream, plated like little works of art. I hadn't touched mine, my stomach too tight with the weight of their words. John was still talking, now about some high-profile case he'd won, his voice loud enough to fill the room. Claire nodded along, her smile practiced, her eyes flicking to me like she was waiting for me to crumble. Wyatt, swirling his wine, tossed out another jab. So, Delilah, still chasing those tech dreams? Or are you finally ready to join the real world? I took a slow breath, my fingers grazing my watch. I'm doing fine in my world, I said, keeping my voice steady. Mary tilted her head, her smile thin as a blade. Fine is such a small word, dear. You always aimed so modestly. The table chuckled again, that polished, cutting sound I knew too well. It wasn't just teasing, it was a reminder. You don't belong. You never did. Claire leaned in, her fork poised over her tart. Do you even have a team, or is it still just you and a laptop? Her tone was sweet, but her eyes weren't. I could have told her about Horizon's 300 employees, the Singapore office, the NATO bid. Instead, I said, I've got people. John snorted, leaning back. People, huh? Hope they're better at picking careers than you are. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse from them. Years of it every holiday, every phone call, until I stopped coming. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with something sharper, like anger mixed with clarity. I wasn't that 22-year-old anymore, nodding politely while they dismissed me. But I wasn't ready to show my hand either. I took a sip of water, the glass cool against my palm, and let their laughter roll over me. Mary raised her glass, her voice smooth as silk. To Delilah's persistence. The toast felt like a trap, but Wyatt clinked his glass anyway, grinning. To the rebels who might figure it out someday. My fingers tightened around my watch, its tick a lifeline. Their words were meant to shrink me, to keep me in the box they'd built years ago. But that box didn't fit anymore. I wasn't here to fight them. I was here to see if they'd changed, if they'd see me. They hadn't. The anger in my chest softened into something else. Resolve. I set my glass down, my eyes on the tart I wouldn't eat, and waited for the moment I knew was coming. It was close now, and I could feel it, like the air before a storm. The dessert plates sat mostly untouched, the peach tarts gleaming under the chandelier's glow. The conversation had shifted, John bragging about a new client, Wyatt interrupting with some stock market rant. I stayed quiet, my fingers brushing the edge of my napkin, my watch ticking softly. Their voices blurred into a familiar hum of self-importance, and I wondered, not for the first time, why I'd come back to this table. Then a soft knock broke through the noise, sharp and out of place. Rachel, my assistant, stepped into the dining room, her black blazer crisp, her face calm but purposeful. She'd been with me since our Berkeley days, the only one who'd believed in Horizon when it was just me and a laptop. She ignored the stares, Claire's raised eyebrow, Wyatt's confused squint, and leaned down beside me. Her voice was low, barely a whisper. Ms. Hill, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the jet's ready for Singapore. The pilot needs confirmation for the flight path within the hour. The room froze. Claire's fork slipped, clattering against her plate. John's jaw tightened, and Wyatt's wine glass stopped mid-swirl. Mary sat up straighter, her eyes narrowing. I didn't react, just folded my napkin and set it down. Thank you, Rachel, I said, my voice even. Tell Captain Lopez we'll proceed as planned. I'll join the board call from the jet after we stop in DC. Rachel nodded, turned, and left as quietly as she'd come. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, like the air had turned to stone. Wyatt blinked, his mouth half open. Jet, he said, like he'd misheard. I met his eyes. For international meetings. Horizon closed a Singapore partnership last quarter. Mary's lips parted, but no words came. John tried to laugh, but it came out choked. So, what, you're running some kind of operation? I pulled my phone from my bag, opened the Bloomberg app, and slid it across the table. The headline glowed. Horizon Systems secures $900 million defense contract with Department of Defense. My photo, taken at a press conference in DC, stared back at them. Wyatt leaned forward, his eyes scanning the screen. That's you. Inudda, no fanfara, no gluating. Just the truth. Mary reached for the phone but stopped, her hand hovering. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, her voice thin, almost fragile. I looked at her, then at John, Claire, their faces caught between shock and something else. Envy, maybe, or regret. Would you have listened? I asked. The question hung there, unanswered. My heart pounded, not with triumph, but with the weight of years. Years of their doubt, their dismissal, their laughter. I'd built something bigger than their world, and they hadn't seen it coming. Neither had I, not really, not until this moment. The watch on my wrist ticked on, steady, mine, and for the first time tonight, I felt like I was finally sitting at my own table. The Bloomberg article sat on my phone, its headline glaring up at the frozen faces around the table. Wyatt's eyes were still glued to the screen, his lips moving silently as he read the numbers. $900 million, 20% of Pentagon's cloud, $6 billion valuation. Claire's hand trembled as she reached for her wine, missing the glass entirely. John's smirk was gone, replaced by a twitch in his jaw. Mary, for once, wasn't in control, her posture rigid as if she could will the moment away. The silence was thick, their shock almost tangible, and I felt it. The shift, the moment they realized I wasn't the Delilah they'd written off. John spoke first, his voice sharp, like he was cross-examining me in one of his courtrooms. This could be exaggerated. Bloomberg's not always accurate. I tilted my head, meeting his eyes. You think the Department of Defense inflates contracts? He looked away, his fingers tightening around his napkin. Wyatt, still staring at the phone, muttered, $6 billion last month? I nodded. We crossed it in July. Mary's voice cut in, soft but unsteady. You built this alone? I shook my head. Not alone. Just not with you. The words landed like a quiet blow, and I saw her flinch, just barely. John tried to pivot, his tone forced. Family supports family, Delilah. You should have told us. We could have helped. I almost laughed. I remembered the meeting he'd had with Mary when I was 25, overheard through a cracked door, when he called me a risk to the Hill name, suggesting they keep me out of the family spotlight. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folded letter, creased, worn, but preserved. Mary's letter, sent years ago, telling me not to tie the Hill name to my unproven venture. I slid it across the table. You told me to keep the Hill name out of it, I said. You said it might not last. She stared at the paper, her hand frozen an inch above it, like touching it would burn. Wyatt, ever the opportunist, jumped in. Delilah, my firm's diving into tech. We could partner, leverage your platform, scale it bigger. Claire nodded quickly, her smile desperate. If you're hiring, I've been looking at tech roles lately. I looked at her, remembering how she'd laughed when I tried explaining my work years ago, calling it nerd stuff. Name one coding language, I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away and my phone buzzed. Rachel, right on time. I stood, folding my napkin, my voice calm. I've got a board vote in 6 hours. NATO contract. Their eyes widened, but I was done. I'd shown them the truth, not for their approval, but for mine. My heart felt lighter, not because they finally saw me, but because I saw myself, clearer than ever. The watch on my wrist ticked, steady as always, and I knew it was time to go. I turned toward the doorway, the weight of the dining room falling away with each step. Mary's voice caught me, soft, almost pleading. Delilah, why night? Why come back at all? I paused, my back to them, the chandelier's light casting my shadow long across the floor. To see if anything had changed, I said, turning just enough to meet their eyes. It hasn't. The scramble started as I reached the hall. John was first, his voice urgent. Delilah, wait. If Horizon's expanding, we could talk strategy, partnerships. I half turned, my expression flat. Now that you know I exist? He froze. Wyatt jumped in, all eager charm. I always knew you were smart, Delilah. I just didn't realize. I cut him off. You didn't realize I stopped needing your validation years ago. Claire tried next, her smile shaky. If you're hiring, I'd love to explore. I didn't let her finish. You laughed when I said I worked with code. You don't get to rewrite that now. Mary stepped forward, her heels clicking, her voice softer, almost maternal. You're still a hill. Family matters. I looked at her, the woman who'd written that letter, who'd let me walk away without a word. Family matter to you, I said. Not to the world I built. Her hand reached out, then stopped. I stepped back. This isn't a fight, I said. It's a line. My phone buzzed again. Rachel, always on time. I pulled on my coat, the motion calm, final. As I opened the front door, I spoke one last time, not to them but to the house, its weight, its silence. You thought I left because I failed. I left because I didn't need your tests. I made my own rules. Outside, the air was crisp, the vineyard dark under the stars. My driver waited, the car's engine a soft hum. I slid into the back seat, the leather warm, familiar. I didn't look back, not at the mansion, not at the windows, not at the people who measured my worth by their table. The next morning, their messages flooded in. John left a voicemail about synergy. Wyatt sent an email about collaboration. Mary's note, delivered by courier, said they were proud. I forwarded them to Rachel, block list. That evening, I sent a box to the estate. No note, just Mary's letter and a photo of their dinner table. My seat empty. A single line read, I was there. You didn't see me, to everyone who's followed this story. Thank you. You've walked with me through judgment, doubt, and triumph. If this hit you, hit subscribe and join us, where every step forward tells a story of grit, heart, and new beginnings. Keep chasing your truth, and I'll meet you at the finish line.